That brings me now to Fulcrum. Done a lot of research online on Fulcrum, and a lot of people are very, I guess I could say, possessive about their thoughts on where Fulcrum should be. And there's a few people out there who are willing to admit that Fulcrum can move around depending on which position you're playing from, where your grip is at, what style of music you're playing, and ultimately it all comes back to number 4 again, musical expression. Depending on what you're trying to express, you're going to find that that fulcrum can, will, and should move around in your hand based on what you're trying to accomplish musically. So I'll show you the fulcrum points. When I showed you the grip, I showed you just the back 3 fingers. You can play with just the back 3 fingers. That fulcrum point is somewhere in here, in these 2 fingers. It's hard to really even isolate it when you're doing that. And what I'm doing right here is I'm just kind of dribbling the stick like a basketball with those back 3 fingers. And the fulcrum point is somewhere in those fingers. Probably a bit of all 3 of them, I suppose. You can have your fulcrum point there and play like that. Some guys sometimes, for some reason, just feel that. They're digging into the ride cymbal and they might go to that for a real loose feel and sound. That's not a common fulcrum point. I wouldn't recommend practicing that or using that as your primary point of fulcrum, but it is a possibility that you may find yourself into, and I want you to think it's okay. You're not wrong in doing that. People have been there before. It works. It's good. You're loose. You're good. Go with it. The next fulcrum point would be on your middle finger. And for me, I find that to be right in here on the second knuckle. My thumb and my second knuckle. Like that. That's a middle finger fulcrum point. My back 2 fingers come around the stick. Now my pointer finger becomes, I kind of think of it as a guide. I lay it on the side of the stick, right around the second knuckle, and I'm using it not to manipulate the stick because the fulcrum is here in the middle finger. I'm using it just to keep the stick straight from flopping around in my hand and getting out of control. So it's almost like a guide. You know, I have the fulcrum there, and this finger's just keeping that stick in line. So there it is with just the middle finger and the thumb. As you can see, when I put those back fingers on it, that stick might want to move around, so I'm going to put the first finger alongside. And my fulcrum point is my middle finger and my thumb. Now keep in mind, your fulcrum is the pivot point for the stick. Probably the best way to think of it is a seesaw. A seesaw has a little triangle or a bench in the middle that serves for that seesaw to do this, right? Well, that's what the fulcrum is in your fingers. It's that point where the stick pivots. I always like to think if you took a nail and put it through your thumb and then through the knuckle of your other finger, that's where the stick is pivoting. So that's the middle finger pivot point. That's also not a very common pivot point. Not a lot of people play there, but again, you may find yourself there and you may think to yourself, this feels pretty good. I like this. That's okay. Go with it. As long as you're relaxed, you've got your space, fingers are in contact, and you're musical, you're good. Go with it. Work on that grip. Use that first finger just as a guide. That brings us to our next fulcrum point. A power point on the second knuckle of your pointer finger. That's going to be on the side of the stick along with your thumb, and that's your fulcrum right there. If we took that screw and drove it through our thumb into the second knuckle of our pointer finger, that's a very common pivot point right there. A lot of people play that. That's a power point. You get a lot of power out of your sticks there. Back 3 fingers are on the stick. Again, I have my space. I'm relaxed. That's a good spot for a fulcrum. And that's a common fulcrum. Next, I have my first knuckle of my pointer finger. First knuckle right here. I'm going to put the stick there and with my thumb alongside of it, right there like that. That is for a more delicate approach to playing, for softer playing. I use that when I'm playing very light. If I'm playing in a musical pit, say, and I have to do a very light part in a show, or if I'm playing orchestra music and I have to play very light, sometimes I'll go to that pivot point or that fulcrum right there on the first knuckle. Again, back fingers on the stick, relaxed, space above the thumb, finger to stick contact. It allows me to be musical in a softer setting, softer playing. That's that fulcrum point. And there's one more fulcrum point that kind of falls in between the last two, between your first and second knuckle. If you're going to wrap that finger around a little bit, and sometimes people do, by nature of just wrapping that finger around, you're going to force that stick in the space between the two knuckles, and it's going to fall in there somewhere for you. You'll find that if you pull that finger around, don't pull it tight, don't close up the gap in your thumb, but just pull it around a little bit, and you'll find the space in between. Yeah, that's another spot that a lot of people will put their fulcrum to play. So I've showed you five fulcrum spots. The first knuckle, in between the first and the second knuckle of your middle finger with your first finger as a guide, and then your back three fingers with what would be kind of a, I don't know what. Again, that's a special technique for other things. Those are all your fulcrum points. Fulcrum's really important, and depending on what you're going to want to accomplish musically, you may find yourself rethinking your fulcrum. And I encourage you to try all of them in exercises to see what they feel like, to see how they work with your hands, and see if they're usable. And embrace them, welcome them, use them. And don't get involved in any arguments online with, well, this one's wrong and that one's wrong and this doesn't work. You know, again, it's all about being musical and being expressive. If it's working for you and you're safe because you're relaxed, which can be shown by that space, and you've got finger contact on the stick, and you're able to make music, you're in a good place. I hope this helps clear up some of the discussions on grip and fulcrum, and I wish you well. Check out some of my other videos and feel free to hit me with some questions.